Today on Locked On Phoenix Suns, Summer League is over. Free agency is mostly done. So what has impressed us the most, and what's still the biggest concern with the Suns roster construction? Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? Welcome back into Locked On Phoenix Suns. I am Benjamin Garcia, host of the Ben Garcia Show mornings and a credentialed Suns media member. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Tuesday. Don't forget, Locked On Phoenix Suns is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. So click that follow or subscribe button to do what thousands, dare I say millions of Suns fans have already done. Become an everydayer and get locked onto the Phoenix Suns each and every day. Joining me today, a staff writer over at Awful Announcing, a credentialed Suns media member, and he's not going to like this, but I have him written out as the godfather of Locked On Phoenix Suns, my guy, Brendon Kleen. What's up, man? Sorry, I'm laughing because you were chewing, and as I'm introducing the show, I can hear it. You are muted. You muted it at the wrong time.
Okay. I thought I was muting it in the right time because I need to freaking get a snack in before my stomach is going to be growling into the mic on top of the nuts. Yeah. Thank you. Eddie House is the godfather of the show. Let's just be clear.
All right. This millennium, you are the godfather of Locked On Phoenix Suns. What are you eating? I meant to ask you that before the show.
Some almonds.
Nice. Very healthy of you. It was funny because pre-show you were eating and like, whatever, we're just talking, no big deal. But as I'm doing the read, I just hear munching in my ear, and I'm like, that's why I started to laugh.
Sorry to everybody. Sorry to everybody on that.
We could it's like Michael Scott in his last week, when you know it's his last week, where he's just kind of lounging around and doing whatever he wants to do, knowing we can't fire him. We know that's not the case, but that's what it was kind of giving me reminiscence of. The Suns have added the following players and one head coach in Jordan Ott and Mark Williams, Kobe Brea, Mom Malawach, Rasheer Fleming, Dillon Brooks, Jalen Green, Nigel Hayes Davis. Those are all the key additions to the Phoenix Suns. What piece of the roster construction this offseason, or maybe something else, Matt Ishbia, his evolution as an owner potentially, what has impressed you the most, Brendon?
Can I do two answers?
Yeah, I was going to say
Okay.
It's your show, but I guess it's not anymore. Just kidding.
I would say that number one is Common Malawach. I think that obviously just you have to constantly remind yourself getting him at number 10 was a boon. Unexpected. Shout out to Toronto for taking Colin Murray-Boyles and paying Jakob Poeltl $100,000 million for whatever reason that they did that. I'm not sure. And letting him fall into the Suns' lap. And then just busting out what he did at Summer League, where we talked about it was up and down. It was rocky. It's not exactly you come away from what happened in Vegas thinking, okay, this guy is just going to plug and play and be Rudy Gobert who can shoot threes from day one or anything. But at the same time, the comfort level with moving around in space, with having the ball in his hands, with taking those jumpers, just speaks to a wider skill set than I would have expected he would have as an 18-year-old rookie. So I'm very bullish and excited to see what he can do. The other answer from me would be, and this is going to be a surprise, it might not be what anybody's expecting, Brian Gregory. I feel like he's done more serviceably than I ever could have thought. Like, it's always hard to parse, and I'm always the first to point out that Matt Ishbia is the end-all, be-all. He reiterated that on Burns and Gambo last week in the interview that we referenced on Monday's show. But we were all worried that Brian Gregory was going to fall on his face when he got onto a call with a Raphael Stone in Houston, or, even let's say an agent of a draft pick, or whatever the types of things are that you really need to be on your A game and respectable and respected in order to nail. And he's nailed a lot of those things. So those are my two answers, but Gregory, I definitely wouldn't have had on my own list even like a month ago.
Maybe that deserves a whole segment in its own. I think that's really interesting with what you said with Brian Gregory, because it does kind of feel like a lot of it has to do with Matt Ishbia. And that's why I kind of like teased in the beginning is like the evolution of maybe him as an owner. I don't know who you give as much credit to. Is it Ishbia? Is it Brian Gregory? Because for me, it feels like it's either one or the other in that instance, because who's on the phone with Rich Paul? It's Matt Ishbia. Maybe Brian Gregory is as well, but not from what I saw. So that's interesting to say. I wouldn't have expected you to go there because still for me, I still think there's some things that Brian Gregory needs to work on. Maybe most people don't care, but it's hard for me to see him as a leader when he goes up to the podium and is the most uninspiring figure in all of sports. He
doesn't need to be a leader. Media. He needs to build a roster.
Maybe. And that's why I kind of put it to the points of maybe he's not the leader. Maybe it is Matt Ishbia. It's still too early to tell, I think, who is pulling. We know Ishbia is pulling some strings, but who's pulling more strings? That's kind of where I would go with it.
What's your answer?
Yeah, for me, it's funny. You asked if you could do a couple of different answers. It's going to make me feel better about what I had to say. But the sheer size and athleticism and youth, which I feel like does kind of all form into one with this Suns team because, man, it's really interesting. When you go and look at the Suns roster and you look at some of their additions, Rasheer Fleming, 6'9", we talked about the 7'3" wingspan. Jalen Green, yeah, he's 6'4", but he's not going to be a traditional point guard. If you had him and Booker back there, like if he's the only small guy on the court, then it's not that big of a deal. Oso Ighodaro big. Kaman Malawach is big. Nick Richards last year, who was added, is big. Mark Williams is a big player. Ryan Dunn, like the addition of size, but not just that, the subtraction of guys that are just old. You and I have talked ad nauseum, man, on the show of like young, twitchier, youthful teams just ran these guys out of the building. The Suns are going to lose games by a lot, less than probably they did last year. And there's going to be times where just the more youthful and more athletic, but also more skilled team is just going to beat them. What I am looking forward to next year is that we're not going to be talking about a team, man, that is getting ran out at halftime simply because the other team can just run up and down the court on them. It's not because they've got more talent, more skill, they're better coached. I think this team is going to put up a fight and be able to get into those shootouts at times of 120 points because both teams have 50 points in the fast break margin. And same defensively, man. It's going to be tough. I get it. They're not a perfectly stout defensive team, but they are going to hold teams a little bit more and make it a little bit tougher for those other teams that when they try to get on transition, not realize that they got Rasheer Fleming and Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro coming down the floor that can run with them. That stuff is all big, man. This is something that the Suns really lacked last year. And when you take out Tyus and you take out Brad Beal and you insert Ryan Dunn or Dylan Brooks and Kaman Malawach into the fold, Mark Williams, it's a completely different team, man. So that's where I'd go there.
100%. The one thing I think that all of that is going to hinge on is can they nail the four-man that they clearly are envisioning? Mm-hmm. A bigger four who can really be a modern NBA player where he has the skill level as a shooter and not a ball handler like he's going to be breaking down the defense and running a pick and roll, but at least comfortable with the ball in his hands if he needs to make a quick decision and has the size to contribute as a rebounder, guard some of those bigger players, maybe even slide over to the five or whatever it's going to look like. We know that they were interested in Naz Reid. They obviously drafted Rasheer Fleming. They have Oso if they can develop him into that type of player. I think that they've checked a lot of the boxes there, but that's the one part that I think is the most uncertain about that element of how they went about their business this summer. They've got center figured out. You know, wings galore. There's at least dudes who can fill that 3-2-3 smaller 4 role. But I think a lot of questions, a big X factor of the season is, does something hit or fall into their laps to give them, you know, not to be so one-to-one about it, but they're Evan Mobley.
Do you think they have that guy on the roster? Like, you know what? Stop that. Who do you think right now starts at the 4 position? Because it's a good point.
I think Dunn. I think it's just going to be Brooks and Dunn would be my guess.
Okay, so Ryan Dunn's going to do it. Lengthier guy, not necessarily a small player, can push some dudes around. Ryan Dunn's probably closer to 6'8" than he is 6'6". So what, 6'7" and an eighth or whatever. But
he needs to get better as a rebounder. Like he has to be able to do that in order to be closer to that type of player. and be anything resembling like a power forward. Because yeah, like power forwards need to be able to shoot and play offense a little bit more in the modern NBA, but they're also not quite the guys of like throw Shane Battier out there like it was 10 years ago either. It's Pascal Siakam now.
So who do you think, just so we're clear, because I agree with all of that, but do you think there's a world where, and this is kind of where I was going towards, in February, maybe the Suns are looking better. Do you think there's a world where Brooks gets moved to the bench, or maybe even Ryan Dunn, and you start Rasheer Fleming and Dylan Brooks, or Dunn and that, two of those three combination, but including Rasheer Fleming?
I think Fleming's the closest that they have to it as a long-term building block. Yeah, for sure. And I know I said Dunn for now, but imagine if you could have Dunn get better on offense enough where he can survive as a real 3, and then you have a guy like Fleming at the 4, if he can get better as a shooter, then you're really cooking and you're looking like the types of teams that are winning right now in the league.
Yeah. So I think for me, man, when you're talking about like that kind of size, like overall, when you add, like the Suns have the ability to be versatile next year. And when you add all the players that they have, what I like is they have a lot of different ways that they can match up with other teams. And they just didn't have that last year, man. It was, I joked last year that we had the death lineup, which was obviously the death of us lineup, in Royce O'Neal, Ryan Dunn, Kevin Durant, Brad Beal, and Devin Booker, the most important key of it all, where they could play a little small ball and they had a couple of guys on the floor that could defend, and Royce O'Neal and Ryan Dunn. But like that stuff didn't work out. Now they have the ability, if they want to go shooters, Green, Book, Grayson, and they could stick Rasheer Fleming and Mark Williams on the court, or Kaman Malawach and Oso Ighodaro on the court. They didn't have that last year. So when you add athleticism, size, and youth, you don't have to worry about anyone getting burnt out or not having enough guys. The Suns are legitimately, they're not 10 deep as a championship team, but they're 10 deep as a playoffs team. And that is enough for me.
Yeah, when you have size and athleticism at every position, you can play multiple styles, right? Like Nurkic can do one thing, Grayson Allen can do one thing, Tyus Jones can do one thing within their position. But the guys that they have now, you're not sure exactly what to expect, and they can match up with the best teams in different ways. It's definitely going to be a strength.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows. There is multitude of other things that the Suns could get better at. The Suns have had a fairly good offseason. However, let's talk about some of the roster concerns and kind of frame it as is, what's the biggest thing that could potentially keep them out of the playoffs this year? Let's talk about that next. First, today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. You ever wish managing your money felt easier? With Monarch Money, it can. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also managing your wealth. I mentioned this before, but it's not even just the times where I lost a job and you had to cut back a little bit years or months ago. It's just normally looking at some of the charges that we have on our credit card reoccurring every month. I know my wife just recently, canceled Paramount Plus, and at one point we had to cancel Netflix because we were paying for multiple different streaming services that we just didn't use. And we were like, well, if we, share our account with someone else and they share theirs with ours, we're saving the money there. If we had Monarch Money, we would have noticed that we were paying for way too many things and not saving the amount of money we'd have likely had been saving without those things. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for $50 off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. All right, keeping the show rolling. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for the Phoenix Suns in the offseason. We spoke about some of the things that we like. However, there were some key subtractions to this team. Maybe addition by subtraction, and guys like Mike Budenholzer and Bradley Beal, but also players like Kevin Durant, Tyus Jones, likely Bol at this point. In this roster construction, or maybe coaching construction, Brendon, what would you say is the number one problem that the Suns have right now that could keep them out of the playoffs? Not just something that is like so big of a problem. It's something that could hinder their ability from potentially being a playoff team this year. You are muted.
So I think there's a lot of ways you could word this one, right? Like, I think that you could either say, it's offense. It's going to be on the offensive end. But, like, what specifically? I have a smaller one I'll throw out at the end of the segment, too. But I think that, really, to me, it does come down to shooting.
Yeah.
Especially if we think that Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal are likely to be relegated to smaller roles or not play much at all. One or both of them. Because, like, it would be tempting to say, a lot of people are watching these guards come off the board, Chris Paul, and, doesn't sound like they're going to go get Malcolm Brogdon according to Gambo, and people are just sitting there, or campaign. Like, there's not enough shot creation to go around. But the reason I wouldn't pin it on that is, they have Devin Booker and Jalen Green. If they stagger those guys, it could be a lot worse. But the reason I say shooting is it's hard for me to imagine, as I've said multiple times already in the kind of the wake of the offseason while we've been talking here at the end of July, it's going to be harder for Booker and Green to be at their best because of the lack of shooting. So that's the concern that I have is, you start Brooks and Dunn. Maybe Dunn takes a step forward again as a shooter and Brooks sustains it, and that cobbles together a decent enough starting lineup. But then those guys we were just kind of hyping up and getting intrigued by in that last segment, a Rasheer Fleming or an Oso Ighodaro or even a Nigel Hayes or, Common Malawach, guys who are very iffy as shooters or not shooters at all, is where you start to really run into some problems. And it's going to be very, very difficult to score, even with the prowess that Booker and Green have as those initiators. So shooting, to me, the Suns have a lot of guys with single skill sets on the offensive end of the floor. They're either athletes and rebounders and physical, or they're just shooters. I think they're going to lean toward playing those more athletic guys like we just talked about as a strength of the team, but I think that's going to come at the detriment of being able to space the floor for their best guys.
Yeah, in an attempt to not step on your toes, and this was like a more broader, I think it's scoring as a whole. A lot of people talk about and you kind of just mentioned it too. Well, if they stagger Jalen Green and Devin Booker, sure, maybe they'll have the ability to kind of get through games, play stout defense. Maybe we're going to turn to the Boston Celtics, heave up 53s a night, and guys are going to hit shots. However, I don't know. Every day I'm finding myself buying more into Jalen Green. I do like the ability, the athleticism he brings in, maybe to become a more efficient scorer. However,
I think that's called hopium. I think that's what
exactly,
they call it, right?
Exactly. I've bought into it, man. Every day, I'm watching the highlights. He's explosive. He's fun. And it's kind of frustrating because when you talk about this, it's like, oh, you guys are already bleeping on Jalen Green before he's here. No, I'm just being honest. Through 4 seasons, Jalen Green has been a little bit of an inefficient scorer. And people have kind of talked about the fact, well, if he's a secondary guy, even Jackson Gatlin over at Locked On Rockets, he's never had someone like Devin Booker, where if he's a secondary scorer, maybe he's a little bit more efficient. Sure. I don't know if I can rest the entirety of secondary scoring for the Phoenix Suns and just I hope. I seriously think, man, that him being a real secondary scorer and more efficient, not even just not getting in Devin Booker's way, him cooking when Devin Booker is not on the court. Sure. If that in its own isn't going to work for the Suns, you're talking about them potentially being worse next year because they just can't get buckets, man. So for me,
we're talking in circles around the same thing because I'm just giving the exact reason why I'm worried Jalen Green won't be able to do that, and you're saying you're worried he won't be able to do that. So I think that's the thing. I think that's the single thing that this season's probably going to hinge on is how good can he be and how efficient can he be trying to score in a less than ideal environment.
In the secondary scoring role, absolutely. And then there's that second big concern offensively. Okay, let's say Booker and let's just say Jalen Green is a more efficient player than he is now. Not incredibly more efficient, but he takes a step forward efficiency-wise. Maybe he takes less threes and hits them at a higher clip. All that's great. Okay, but what about behind this team or behind those two guys? And that's what you and I have talked about. There is going to be a massive role on the shoulders of guys of Rasheer Fleming, Grayson Allen, and Ryan Dunn. and a little bit of Mark Williams too, but the outside creation for guys like Jalen Green to be able to drive and kick it out to them, those guys are going to have to make shots. We talked about this a little bit last week, but if we're talking about like a secondary concern to my main concern, Jalen Green, Devin Booker can be awesome. They're not going to be enough every night to outscore most teams in the NBA.
Absolutely. Can I throw my second one at you?
Absolutely. Absolutely, okay. Godfather.
So let's take a little bit of a long way there. The coaching staff last year for the Los Angeles Lakers, can I remind you of who was on that?
Yeah.
Nate McMillan, Scott. So this is JJ Redick's staff, of course. Obviously, him being the head coach. Nate McMillan, Scott Brooks, development, Greg St. John, who came from Dallas with Jason Kidd's staff, Lindsey Harding, up-and-coming woman in the industry, and a couple of people whose names I'm not going to pretend that I know. That's 2 former head coaches, one of which has been to the NBA Finals, the other which has made multiple deep playoff runs, including, I believe, the conference finals with Atlanta the year that they made it with Trae Young, and a couple of prominent up-and-comer in the developmental space. I don't want to presume to know anything about Jordan Ott to say whether he can overcome this or not, but the Suns are not going to have a staff where if I were to read it on a podcast, anyone would know probably any of the names that I said outside of DeMarre Carroll because he played in the NBA and had a nice career pretty recently. So I know it feels like I'm beating a dead horse, and I know it feels like kind of vague. I can't sit here and tell you what the effect of it's going to be in the same way that I can say, well, if the Suns can't shoot, their offensive rating is probably going to be close to this because this other team last year couldn't shoot and they had 2 good creators. And it's hard to say, but I don't think we can overstate that Ott is sort of fighting an uphill battle right now to ingratiate himself as a head coach and just be comfortable, given that he did not land a Scott Brooks or a Nate McMillan or people like that, the way that other teams with similarly inexperienced younger coaches have made it such a priority to do.
Well, I'm just looking at Mike Budenholzer's staff from last year, and you got Dave Fizdale, although the Suns asked him to come back. Chad Forcier, who 23 years as an NBA assistant head coach. But outside of that, it's kind of a lot of no names as well. And we're talking about last year, how it was kind of hard for him to be able to build his staff. So you could attribute some of the offensive woes last year to that. So that's interesting, man. That's something that probably when Jordan Ott finally puts his stuff together, we'll talk about exactly what it's going to look like. But
yeah,
that's an underlying problem. That's something at least I didn't really think of in that respect. Let's keep the show rolling. The Suns appear to be potentially out on Jonathan Kaminga. That is per Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic. Is it the right move? Wrong move? What will the Suns pivot to next, if anything? Let's talk about it next. All right, closing out the show. According to Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic, is it still called the Arizona Republic? AZ Central, yes. Whatever it is.
AZ Central is just the website, yeah.
Oh, okay. They have a different... Okay, that's fine. According to Dwayne Rankin of the Arizona Republic, the Suns have reportedly been priced out on Jonathan Kaminga. Dwayne Rankin reported that while the Suns have interest in acquiring Kaminga, that they are, quote, unlikely to land him because the lack of draft capital and assets to deliver on what would be a sign and trade for the Warriors. I tweeted something out last week, and I thought you were going to jump me through the phone. I said, if you can get Jonathan Kaminga for Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal, which I did know is not much for Jonathan Kaminga, but it's also like, who has the leverage here? The Warriors do have some as well, but maybe he doesn't want to be there. Maybe the market isn't as hot for him. Maybe Steve Kerr doesn't even want him back. Like, those are all variables that went into that tweet, although I know that it's not great. Thoughts on that? Is this likely the end of Jonathan Kaminga to the Suns? Should it be? Should the Suns be scavenging around and trying to move Allen and Royce O'Neal to make it happen?
Well, this proves to me if Grayson Allen and Royce O'Neal alone were enough, then Jonathan Kaminga would be on the Suns right now, correct?
I don't think
you
necessarily
think that you think that this article is saying that
Well,
the Suns are holding out on not including one of those two guys?
Okay, I
No,
don't even.
that's the
Okay,
Warriors
that's true.
saying
That's
no
true.
to the Suns.
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Who knows? It might not even gotten that far. Maybe Jonathan Kaminga wants $35 million, and the Suns are like, no way. Like, we're not doing
this
that.
article says draft capital and assets to complete the sign and trade. All I'm doing is reacting to what you just read here.
You're right.
So I think that the thing is that you're right. Like, it is about leverage. It is about it. Like, the core thing here is Kaminga versus the Warriors, and the Suns are just potentially in a position, like other teams would be trying to be opportunistic and go get Kaminga if that central problem or negotiation doesn't go well. If something breaks down there, then that's when you start to get to a sign and trade, unless somebody just blows the player out of the water with an offer sheet. The Suns obviously don't have cap space, so they can't do that. Or they just give up an arm and a leg in a trade, which the Suns don't even have the assets to do that. So really, they're only going to get Kaminga if the Warriors just cannot stand the sight of him anymore. And even then, clearly, it doesn't even appear to be enough. The team, like you're talking about leverage, the incumbent team in restricted free agency has 99.99999%. That's why restricted free agency exists. The player has no leverage unless they want to take the qualifying offer and go play on a 1-year deal with no guaranteed future money and then become an unrestricted free agent, which basically nobody ever does because it's such a big risk. So, frankly, I think it's more likely that the Warriors would just bring Kaminga back on a deal that they don't even love that much, and then just kick the can down the road knowing that they're going to eventually trade him, than they would take a bad sign and trade just because they want him to go be banished to some other team. So I think that's what I read this paragraph from Dwayne to mean. Mm-hmm. And I think it's kind of what we expected from the Suns all along, that this was a long shot. All we heard was that they were interested. We never heard that the deal was on the 1-yard line or anything. And maybe it's just something to file away and say, hey, maybe if they do sign him, next summer he could be another target for the Suns when he's available inevitably all over again. Because you're right, the Warriors don't like him.
Well, that's my point. And so, I want to get into the emotion behind it, because there was a part of me that was like, that could feel like a young up-and-coming team, although I think there's clear schematical issues with that. However, if you're the Warriors, I'm not locked on Warriors, but like, you are trying to win a title. Steph Curry is going to be 36 next year. If you know that Jonathan Kaminga is not someone that you're going to use in a playoff setting, why would you drop $30 million a year on him? Like, would you rather, maybe the Suns move Royce, right? Maybe they move Royce O'Neal and they get, maybe a first-round pick, but probably
they're not. But that's the other thing, is they're not receiving anything positive for Grayson Allen or Royce O'Neal, because if they were, it would have happened already. You think they're waiting? They have an offer out there for Royce O'Neal for a first-round pick, and they're just going, we're good. We'd rather have Royce O'Neal sit and rot on our bench. No, of course. They want a first-round pick, and they haven't been able to get one.
Okay, that's a good point to be able to break that down from that aspect, because my point is just like, well, maybe they're waiting on that, but you're right. A first-round pick or Royce O'Neal, I'd rather have the first-round pick regardless if I'm getting Jonathan Kaminga. Okay, fine. And then the math just doesn't work if you move Grayson Allen out for even 2 first-round picks. It's not ever going to be the case, but I'm just saying.
And frankly, I think the same thing is true of Grayson Allen. Brett Siegel has reported at Clutch Points that both of those players, and he went on PHNX last week, that both of those players are available. Grayson and Royce can be had. No one wants them because they make exorbitant salaries over 3 seasons each, and they're both 30-plus years old and just came off of mediocre to bad seasons. So the Suns are just stuck with those guys, I think. Okay. You kind of answered the question then. So I mentioned this at the start of the show, right? Summer League's done. Free agency's mostly done. The waiting for the big ball to drop, like we kind of were last year, and then we kind of had to continue telling the listeners that Mike Budenholzer was the big shoe to drop last year, or getting Tyus Jones in a vet minimum was. It's over, right? Jalen Green and Jordan Ott were the big shoes. The Suns are going to get someone, whoever that may be. It doesn't sound like it's Ben Simmons. I've thrown out a guy in Jordan Goodwin who I actually would like to talk about tomorrow late in the show. But
it's going to be a vet minimum guy who comes in, is going to play minimal minutes, and Suns fans should temper their expectations. That's what it kind of feels like it is to me, man.
Yeah, I thought it was funny. I mean, we kind of had a version of this conversation yesterday. I know we started with trades in this segment, but I think it really just, I don't see a pathway right now to it being anything other than a player who is currently a free agent or who could be bought out that fills this last roster spot. Like, I just think that's what it is. And Bruce Vilas, who does a YouTube stream, Suns Digest, that you and I have both been on, he wrote about Javon Carter today. I don't know if you saw that, but I threw Javon out as like a random example at the end of the show yesterday. And then I think, people are like, yeah, I think that it's going to have to be something like that. And especially as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, Gambo keeps axing these other Brogdon, Simmons, Campaign, whatever. It's like, who is it gonna be then? I don't necessarily know that answer. I guess the only other thing I could see is Nick Richards, who we haven't really talked about in a minute, and it does seem like he's most likely going to be on this roster, but he's the one actually player, because his contract is relatively small and he's on the younger side, that I think you actually could get some second round picks back for, or maybe you trade him to a team that has a guard, like a guard Nick Richards, somebody who's kind of on the outs, not 100% in their plans. I haven't looked through every roster to find a great example of what I'm talking about, but you could flip him to another team who needs a center and you need a guard, and they're roughly similar value, and that's how you could do it. But I guess Javon Carter that trade probably works. Like, maybe it's that. I don't know. I don't know if the Bulls need a center, but that type of thing. Otherwise, it's just going to be somebody off the scrap heap, I think.
I like Bruce Vilas, but just so we're clear, and I know he comments sometimes on the show, he definitely saw Locked On Suns last night and saw no, he's a good dude. I like Bruce. At some point I'll have to bring him on the show. I'm just saying, like, that's a you thing, because as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, someone's been listening to Locked On Phoenix Suns. Another guy, man, just briefly, because I got a lot of flack for this last night, and I think it's because I'm being realistic. The Suns have one roster spot remaining, one playable roster spot remaining that they can use each and every night. Doesn't Jordan Goodwin kind of fit that mold? I had Jason Timp on the show months ago when you were out, and he literally mentioned, he's like, the Suns need to go get a guy like Jordan Goodwin or a bunch of Jordan Goodwins. Pesky defenders. I mean, last year he shot the 3 ball, 2.8 attempts, I think it was, at like a 38% clip. That's better. But what I like about someone like Jordan Goodwin is he's not going to take minutes from anyone like Chris Paul would have. He's younger, still got some to prove. A pesky defender that isn't going to be a sore spot because you're going to be able to put bigger guys around him. I think, like, you're Javon Carter type. I think Jordan Goodwin even fits that even better. And, like, why would I get rid of Nick Richards if the offers are like 1 or 2 second round picks and I'm still worried about Mark Williams' health? Jordan Goodwin?
Yeah, the Carter, my initial idea with Javon yesterday was just that the Bulls could maybe buy him out. I'm not saying I would necessarily love the idea of trading Richards for him. I was just kind of spitballing.
Yeah.
I would say, look, if the 3-point shooting that you reference from Goodwin with the Lakers in 29 games last season is real, sure, then of course that's a really great thing, but they just cut him, and they were the one who employed him while he had that hot streak, and he only took 68 total threes. So I'm not exactly going to sit here and tell you I'm convinced that he's going to become
but he's a
38-point shooter, a 38%. Yeah. But like I said yesterday, I think that whoever... First of all, we should say there's 2 roster spots because Brea ended up on a 2-way. So they have 2 full roster spots left. I think one of these guys, I think if it's a guard, this guy will play minutes. Like, I think that's why they were in on Smart. Like, if it was just nobody, then they would just go sign some young guy who doesn't really matter and see if he can turn into something the way that they did with Gillespie, although he was on a 2-way last year, right? Like, they would have done that probably already, or it'd be somebody from overseas or an undrafted free agent, or they just give the spot to Brea, right? I think the fact that they're waiting and being patient and exploring an opportunity like Marcus Smart tells me that there's an opening in the rotation for this guy to potentially play, whether it's now or maybe when Grayson Allen, if they can trade him or whatever it ends up looking like, I'm not sure. The other thing about Jordan Goodwin that I have to point out is you told me Marcus Smart was too small. They're the same height.
Yeah, but Marcus Smart is different. I'm seeing it as, again, you're falling into the trap too. I'm seeing it as someone who is clearly going to play behind Colin Gillespie, because my thoughts of getting someone who's actually going to play a ton, yes, I do worry about small, brittle as well in terms of Marcus Smart, all those kinds of things. Vet guy who's going to take minutes from the younger guy and Colin Gillespie. I am okay rolling out Colin Gillespie as my backup guard next year, really my only point guard right now, but as my backup guard because I want him to get minutes. I want to see what I have in him. If I need to go pick up someone so that's my point. Like when I say like I don't really want Marcus Smart, what I'm saying is I don't want him to take minutes from Colin Gillespie. And I'm seeing I keep saying this last spot. Kobe Brea but he signed a two-way deal, so two-way spots are open. I see it as someone who's not going to play a ton. That's where I get into it. So that's why I say like Jordan Goodwin, perfect spot play when Booker's out for because it's load management and in November against the Pistons, or I guess that's a bad comp now, but whatever. Throw the Hornets and throw Goodwin in. That's my point. That's the continuous process I keep on trying to take.
I think that's where we're just on different sides of it. It sounds like I think this guy might play a little bit. You're less thinking he will. I think, frankly, that comes down to Grayson Allen. How is he going to be like an every night part of this rotation? Maybe because I mentioned that they need shooting. Maybe I'm just dumb to think he won't. And he makes a lot of money and he's still in his prime. Maybe I'm just goofy to assume that as I'm saying they're stuck with him, they're going to just bench him? Maybe I'm talking myself out of that, as I think about it more. And maybe it is just going to be somebody who is relegated to a bench status, in which case, yeah, Goodwin, perfect. Put him on, put him at the end of the bench, call him up when one of these guys needs to take a night off, and otherwise hope he gets better in Tempe with the Valley Suns or whatever.
My last thing I would say is I'm not rooting for that to happen. If the Suns are able to, this is nonsense, but if the Suns can luck into Trae Young or a really good mid-level that would be seen as a mid-level exception player, yes, I'm all for it. What I don't want to do is bring an old, brittle Chris Paul to take minutes away from Colin Gillespie. That's just what I'm foreshadowing that's going to be. So that's why I say someone like Jordan Goodwin. I'm not rooting for the Suns to be worse, if that makes sense. That'll wrap us up for today, guys. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Check us out on all social media platforms. And for Brendon, myself, and all the people who are watching Locked On Phoenix Suns, we will see you guys tomorrow.